Welcome to another episode from Tech Life Stories. I'm joined today by Georgina Otubela, also known as Georgie. Georgie is a IT service delivery manager, a ITIL 4 certified and Prince 2 practitioner. She's a BSI and ISO committee member. Currently working at Vida Home Loans. Previously worked for the likes of Sony, Zenith Bank and Savills. She's a mentor for Read Women in Tech mentoring program. She's also the co-founder of Women of ITSM, degree in computing from the University of Greenwich. I hope I've done you justice, Georgie. What do you reckon?
You have. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Okay, good. For our listeners, this is the second time we've had to get Georgie on because the first hour that we did our podcast recording didn't record very well. So this is take two for us.
Second time's a charm, hey?
Second time's a charm indeed. Okay. Why don't you just give us a bit of a rundown about your past, how you got into IT, you know, some of the decisions you made about getting into the world of technology, and the steps you took to kind of get to where you are today.
Of course. I will try not to take up the whole hour. So I have been in tech for probably just over 18 years now, and it wasn't the plan. The plan for me growing up, I had an aspirations to go into law. And as I approached kind of my further education stage, leaving school, thinking about college and uni choices and stuff, my parents sat me down and had a really honest conversation with me, saying they probably couldn't make the opportunity available for me to go to university. So did I want to consider another path? And I had two cousins who I'm very, very close to who just finished an IT course. And they said, you know, you'd probably be really well suited to it. So at 16, I didn't really know what I wanted to do beyond being a lawyer. So I gave it a shot, and I always enjoyed IT at school. So, you know, thought, how bad can it be? And it turns out I was actually quite good at it without blowing my own trumpet. And I found a way to put myself through university myself in the end. Towards my second year, my tutors were saying, you know, it would be a waste for you not to go. So I found a way. I think something that will come out through this story is once I decide I'm doing it, the sheer determination will get me there one way or another. Mm-hmm. But one thing that always stood out for me is I went from an all-girls school in secondary school. By the time I went to college, I was one of three women out of a class of about 45. And I was the only one that finished successfully. The other two kind of dropped out into our second year, which I thought was a bit of a shocking statistic.
Yeah.
Going into university, very similar statistics. Again, I was in a huge minority. I'd say less than 10% of women across a computing degree. It's just really crazy standards. And then whilst I was at uni in my final year, I thought I wanted to go into web design. I'm quite creative. It's something I enjoyed. And I was looking to get some exposure. So whilst I was kind of working part-time around my university course, I approached a local company that provided IT support services and said, I'd love to redesign your website for free. Because frankly, it was terrible. And they said no, but they did offer me a part-time job.
Nice.
So I got paid working experience in my final year at university, which really kind of gave me a head start amongst all my colleagues when we left, because I'd had exposure to then working for a managed service provider, doing first to third line stuff for a number of local companies, from local solicitors and estate agents to a waste management company. So by the time I left university with everyone else, I didn't want to then be a first liner. I went to Warner Music, so I was like, right, it's time to kind of move into working in London and progressing with big companies. And I hated every minute of it because I felt so pigeonholed straight away. I was like, I don't want to reset passwords and change printer toners and run between three sites carrying backup tapes when I've been building servers, racking servers, configuring email and all of those kind of things. So I got quite frustrated early on in my career, and I did jump around a little bit through various service desk and infrastructure specialist roles. And after about probably 5 or 6 years, I decided to specialise in Microsoft Exchange and VMware. And about a year later, I thought, I just don't love this. And I was I was very, very close to being that statistic of women that quit the industry before the age of 35, because I just thought this just isn't for me. I don't care about the next revision, sitting up late at night patching servers. I just don't care. And I almost fell into a team leadership role for a service delivery team, and the rest is history. I found my passion. So I started in kind of team leadership roles, then worked my way up in various service delivery manager roles, and then a few IT manager roles, and here I am today, back in a service delivery manager role. But each company you go to band these very similar roles as different things. So I've been an IT manager, a service delivery manager, a regional service delivery manager. They're all very much the same thing. It's all about delivering quality end service to the business that you're supporting.
Sure.
So yeah, here we are.
Here you are. Okay. I got a lot of notes to go back on. One thing I want to ask you about straight away: do you know the percentage of women that would generally quit IT before the age of 35?
I can tell you that I think it's about 50%,
Okay.
which is double the rate of men.
Yeah.
Well, that statistic is women quitting the industry within the 10 to 20 years of their career.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That's
So I
interesting.
recently I led a panel at the Service Desk show back in April, all around kind of talent retention and recruiting diverse talent. And that was one of the main things that stood out for me is the retention side of things. You know, the barrier to entry is already incredibly high, but those women that we are getting into the industry, it's not a job for life, because, and I don't know um, if that's kind of issues around balancing careers and home life, which is a challenge in itself, or whether it's things to do with biases that we still see in the workplace in terms of misogyny. There are many, many issues, and hopefully we keep chipping away at it to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest with you. We're working in a world where we can all work from home now, right? There should be a lot more flexibility. So it's concerning that we are still losing individuals, no, especially women in IT that we struggle to recruit in the first place. So to lose 50% of them at that stage,
Yeah.
is quite alarming, really. Do you think maybe? And like you said earlier on in your career, you were a little bit frustrated. Maybe you didn't know the exact path you wanted to go down. Do you think maybe there's a way we can fast forward, a process for not just women but for men as well to kind of get them to the right career path within technology that they can continue it down?
I think with hindsight, I think there's a lot to be said for kind of offering mentoring and guidance,
Hmm.
which wasn't really a thing when I started out in my career. And I don't know if that's just because of the industries that I worked in, because I was kind of in finance a lot in my early career, where it almost felt a bit jobs for the lads, but also you're kind of going back to the early 2000s where it was a bit more of a lad-led culture in the industry.
Yeah.
But as I've progressed into leadership roles, one of the things that I do with my team is I ensure that we focus on professional development and mentoring throughout the time that people within my team, because I think it's really important to ensure that people feeling satisfied in their career, because I think that's the easiest way to lose them is if, you just almost give up hope. And whether it's you address these issues, whether you help people pivot or you help them navigate whatever issues or barriers they're going through, you can retain people a lot better. And I'm a big believer in recruiting talent, but then maintaining it. And not letting people leave after 2 years to go and do what they want to do somewhere else. I'd rather bring people in, mold them into areas that they want to go in, and see them progress and keep good talent in the business, and then backfill kind of the more junior roles and bring fresh talent in.
Yeah, no, it's really good that you're doing that. I think you're right around the mentorship, etc. How do you think, for example, if you're a candidate and they're coming in to interview with you, how? Because I think anyone can just say we're going to mentor you, right? And I think probably
Mm.
organisations do, and they say that we're going to put you on training courses, we're going to help develop your career, but then they don't. So if you're a
Mhm.
candidate, how do you ensure that you're joining the right company, the right manager that is then going to give you those opportunities?
So I'll answer that from two perspectives. So firstly, how I interview candidates coming into my organisations is I set that boundary first thing in the interview. I ask them if they've got a long-term vision, because sometimes kind of going into your first, second line roles, you don't know what you want to do at that point. You think, you're just finding your feet. So we have that really honest conversation. And then I say, as I just said to you about kind of the talent retention side of things, is I would rather keep you and help guide you in the right areas and give you that right level of support, whether it's a mentoring, whether we look at training. I'm very big on the soft skill side of things in terms of training, because I think, the tech you can learn,
Hmm.
but particularly in service delivery roles, you need that customer service aspect. So I'm very big on promoting that and kind of setting that point right at the interview stage, so the candidate knows what they're going to get from me as well as what I'm expecting of them. Um, and then if I put myself in the shoes of a candidate, that's actually one of the questions that I ask at every interview, because it's not just, I think, particularly the kind of roles that I look at for myself these days, I'm not just there for a 9 to 5. I really do want to know that it's the right culture fit for me, it's the right work life balance fit, it's somewhere where I can continue to grow, because I'm not at a point where in my career where I just want to go in and get paid. I want to continually step up the career ladder. I'm not done yet.
Really interesting to hear you say that. And then, what's your thoughts on um, kind of like hybrid working, going into the office? Do because you're a mum, right? So
I am.
do you want to go into an office? Do you want that flexibility to go into the office or work from home? How do you see it?
So I love hybrid working. At the moment, I go into the office 1 to 2 days a week, and it's great for me. I there are days where I wish I was fully remote because of the work life balance situation. Being able to do the school run at both ends of the day and stuff. It's wonderful, but I really do see the value of being in the office in terms of those conversations and just bringing people together easier.
Yeah.
Um, and when we are in the office together as a team, it's always a really productive day, even if you're not kind of churning through work. The kind of the building momentum, gaining understanding, giving people that opportunity to share problems and things like that. If in terms of if they're working on a project or a particular piece of work that they're a bit stuck on, just being able to brainstorm. You don't get that same level of value doing it remotely, even if you kind of bring people on a remote call, because you're sat on a call, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that's guilty of this. I'm looking at you on one screen, the second screen I've got Outlook open,
Yeah.
and I'm half distracted by what's coming in, or I'm making a note of something that I need to do afterwards. Whereas when I'm in the office, I am 100% focused on the person that's in front of me. So for me, hybrid working for the win. I love it. And I think as awful as the COVID era was, it did us a favour, because I think so many organisations who were very anti-remote got to experience it firsthand, and it's changed the working world, not just in the technology sector, but across so many sectors.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we was probably heading that way, but COVID just fast forwarded it by 5 to 10 years, right?
Yeah,
I think
completely accelerated it.
yeah, completely. I think some organisations were kind of already kind of like doing that, but yeah, it's just made it so much more even kill for everyone looking for remote hybrid type working, and it just helps. Like you say, you want to drop off your kids, you want to pick them up sometime. It just helps being at home sometimes. And look,
Yeah,
my, I do that run. It takes 15-20 minutes out of my day. It's the
yeah,
same as someone who goes into an office who goes and have a cigarette break for a couple of times a day. They'll use up 15,
exactly.
20 minutes. So it's the same amount of time. No, that the employer's not losing out. I think sometimes people say, well, do they really need to work from home, etc.? But I'm a firm believer that it works. I mean, there's four of us here, and we're all remote based. We don't miss out on anything. We check in. Yes, once a week we come in
Yeah,
all together to kind of get together and, like say, have those kind of like team meetings where we can kind of like
yeah,
cross ideas, and it kind of keeps the unity and the culture of us together.
exactly.
But for the rest of the time, we're fine working from home. There's no issues at all.
Yeah, that's it. I think in terms of mental well-being, for me, it's paramount, because not doing an hour and a half commute each way means I get to go to the gym first thing in the morning. That's done and out of the way. I feel fresher. I'm able to get on with my day. Um, and I don't. I don't necessarily stick to a 9 to 5 working environment. You know, come 5 o'clock, I will take my laptop downstairs and do a few bits and bobs in the kitchen while I do my daughter's dinner. But then I
Yeah.
might jump back online and just tidy a few things up. So if anything, I probably work beyond my contracted hours. But it works both ways. You know, there's great flexibility on both sides.
Yeah, no, it's good. And you touched on your daughter there. I know you're very keen to be a role model for your daughter, and obviously you are doing the Read Women in Tech kind of mentoring program, and you're now a co-founder of Women of ITSM. Talk to me a little about raising a young lady and the path you'd like her to go down, and then some of these kind of or the co-founding of the Women of ITSM and the Read program that you're part of as well.
Of course. I mean, without sounding cheesy, she is the reason I do all of this.
Okay.
I was quite happy in my career before becoming a mum. I think whilst I was on maternity leave, I was, dreading that going back to work a bit. And I went back to work for the first year and thought, this is probably as far as I'm going to go now in terms of my career. And I think I've hit a bit of a ceiling, but at least I get to be a great mum. And I just had a wake up call one day. I was like, what kind of example am I setting for her? If I say, yeah, I had quite a good career, and then I hit pause and just cruised through. Because I want her to be whatever she wants to be. You know, I suspect she's probably going to go into a STEM career. She's very engineering minded already, and we have arguments around some of the construction that she builds and things. I'm not pushing her down that route, of course.
Yeah.
But it is all about her and setting the example, and not just in terms of career, but I'm very keen that she doesn't fall into gender stereotyping and things like, girls play with Barbies and women don't do X, Y, and Z. I mean, there was an example a few weeks back where we were in B&Q and we was getting some paint and stuff. And I was carrying some to the till, and the lady said to my daughter, she went, "Why's your mummy carrying that? That should be daddy's job." And I was like, "No, we don't do gender stereotyping in this house. Like, I'm the painter and decorator. I'm quite happy to get on with it."
Yeah.
And I want her to see that strong female role model. Like, she knows I lift weights. She knows I go for a run. She knows that daddy equally does all of those things. But it's about showing her that she can do whatever she wants to do. If she chooses to go down that route, great. If she doesn't, that's also absolutely fine. And it really got me thinking that there wasn't this kind of help available when I started in tech. There was no women of ITSM. There was no Read support group. There was no mentoring outside of my organisation. I mean, I've been really fortunate. I've worked with some fantastic leaders over the years that I call friends and family now. So I've had great mentors, but beyond that, it just didn't exist. So I want to be able to help be the change, really. And that's part of the reasons I go into schools as a STEM ambassador, to talk about future career options in terms of further education, and industries and types of roles that you can go into that are not just limited to service delivery management, not even not limited to just IT. It's about really talking to young women and helping them get on the right path so that they can be what they want to be. And, I was so humbled when I spoke to a number of year 10s recently that so many of them want to be architects, some want to be bakers, some want to go into law, some want to go into medicine. And it's things that I love to see. And we had some real honest discussions around further education and is university, is it essential? And although I've had the benefit of going myself, I explained to them that it was a very different time. I mean, what I paid for my yearly tuition fees is probably more like in terms of tuition fees these days. So we talked about, the practicalities of it, and do they want to be paying back student loans well into their 30s, 40s? Some people will never get to a point where they pay them off. So yeah, a very long answer to your question, but
No,
yeah,
it's good. It's
basically,
good.
I want to be the change.
No, it's good. I love what you're doing for your daughter. You not shied away, but you didn't. For me, if you tell us a little bit more about Women of ITSM, because you've co-founded this with Lucy Greenwade and Sophie Hussey. I know it's still relatively new. What stage you at? What are you looking to achieve? I can see your smile on your face already. I can see it's a passion of yours. So, tell me a little bit more about it. Tell our listeners about it.
Okay, I will tell you what I can.
Okay,
Some of it we're still fleshing out, if I'm completely honest.
sure.
But we are looking to launch a community this summer, in July, for women to come together in the service management industry. And we'll be offering things like support, mentoring. There'll be aspects of coaching involved, but we're also creating a really safe space for people to come along and chat. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about bringing to it is opening up around something that I've particularly struggled with throughout my career, which is imposter syndrome. So we're going to really talk about that, and it's also going to give people the ability to network with others in similar roles, look at career development. Um, yeah, there'll be a lot to it. So yeah, watch this space launching in July.
Okay,
But yeah, I
that's good.
couldn't ask to do it with better co-founders. Lucy and Sophie are amazing women. And I came across Lucy because she was my coach. So this time last year we started working together, and then that turned into a friendship, and then I met Sophie, and we just realised that the three of us are really like-minded individuals,
Yeah,
who work really well together. Like, we've so far not had conflict. It's we managed to make decisions really easily, and we're all on the same page. We want to create a better world for other women like us.
good. I love it. I love what you're doing. Obviously, I've had Lucy and Sophie on the podcast recently, and they've pretty much given me the same answer as you have there. Keeping our listeners on their toes, expecting more, which I like. Going back a couple of elements there, because you're also doing the Read Women in Tech mentoring program. What's actually involved with that? Is it just literally being a mentor for young women in technology? How much time have you
Not
got
at
put into
all.
that? Tell me a bit more
So
about it.
yeah, of course. So you can give as much or as little as you like. And I'm a mentor on there, but I'm also a mentee. So I have mentors, and there's a huge pool of women on there. Well, women and men really. And I've mentored women that are looking to progress in leadership. So some looking to move into team lead roles and head of roles. I've also mentored women that are started just trying to move into IT from other careers, or that are so young they're kind of stepping out of university. And in terms of commitment, it's really as much or as little as you like. So at the moment, I'm mentoring two young ladies, but in the past, I've had kind of up to five, and the frequency of which you meet and catch up with them is something that you agree per relationship. So sometimes I speak to people kind of once a month, others it's a couple of times a month. And then once we've done a bit of an intense kind of development program, so to speak, we then drop it down to every other month or so and just have a check in and see how things are progressing from the. I almost try to offer a bit of coaching, so to see how they're getting on with some of the steps that we've agreed that they'll go away and implement.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think the initial commitment per relationship is a year, but you can extend beyond that. You can bring it shorter if you need to, and it's completely flexible. But I'm very grateful for the support that I've received on there as well. I've had a couple of mentors across the years for various different things. So some I've gone on there to specifically look at career advice and how I progress into more senior leadership roles. Um, and other times I've gone on there to talk about the softer side of things, such as tackling my imposter syndrome. Um, and some of it's just kind of around, I had a specific aim of I wanted to improve my reporting that I give to leadership teams that I work with. So I wasn't looking for a year-long program. I was just looking for a concentrated piece of advice. So it's all there. There's a huge pool of people. I would suggest to anyone, go and sign up and take a look and see if, it's just a phone call at the end of the day. You don't have to commit beyond that if you don't want to.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's great what you're doing. I think you're a great ambassador for women. So keep doing what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
Obviously, for the listeners, it's great what you're looking to achieve with Women of ITSM, which is going to be launched. So looking forward to hearing more about that as well going forward.
Well, we do have a newsletter as well, so please do have a look for us on LinkedIn and sign up to the newsletter. Our newsletters come out every Wednesday, and that will keep you informed of kind of how we're progressing and when we're ready to launch.
Okay. So for the listener, how would they sign up to that newsletter? Have they got to just find you on LinkedIn, or is there a website they
No,
can go to?
we have a if you search for Women of ITSM, you'll find our group page, and then all of the details are on there to sign up to our newsletter, which is hosted on Substack.
Okay.
You can also connect with any of us directly, so myself or Lucy Grimwade or Sophie Hussey, and you'll see us. We post about it quite regularly on our own pages as well as through the Women of ITSM page. And we are also on Instagram under Women of ITSM. So if you can't find us on LinkedIn, take a look on Instagram.
Good. I'll be checking it out myself. I look forward to seeing more and
Thank
reading
you.
more from the newsletter. You touched on imposter syndrome a couple of times now. Talk me through that, because when we did the first podcast, which we couldn't record, you did talk about it quite a bit, and actually you're maybe it's because we've met a couple of times now. You're definitely a lot more comfortable and confident with me this time around, but before maybe a little bit more nervy. So actually, it'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
So since we did take one, I've presented at the IT Service Desk show in April, and I think that honestly did wonders for my confidence. I was asked to lead a panel in the keynote theatre, so standing up, kind of mic'd up with a couple of hundred people in front of me. It's a real fight or flight moment, but I think it was really worthwhile. And as much as I was very nervy about it, I'm glad I said yes. And about a year ago, I really wanted to make a difference. So I've started this journey where if opportunities are coming up, I'm going to say yes to them, whether I'm petrified of it or not, because I just have to get over myself. But imposter syndrome is something that I've always suffered with, and it never goes away. There are times where I can silence it a bit more. But it creeps in. It crept in this weekend. It's just one of those things that happens. And some days are good days and some days are bad days. I have a real issue accepting compliments or positive feedback from people, and I'm surrounded by really wonderful, encouraging people who believe in me. And I wrote an article this weekend, which is going to be shared with our ISO community. And I shared it with David Barrow and Sophie Hussey, who have been guests on your podcast. And David's feedback was, "This is exceptional." And I read it, I was like, "Oh, that's really nice." And then this little voice in the back of my mind goes, "But he's such a nice guy. Maybe he's just saying it's exceptional because that's just who he is. He's really kind." But then the next day I read it back and I'm like, actually, this is a solid piece. I've produced a really good article here, but it's always that niggling voice that's in the back of your mind that you think, and I've had it throughout my career, where you wake up some days and you go, it's just a matter of time before people figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. Or I've got this far because I'm a people person and I'm easy to talk to, and I enjoy conversating with people. It doesn't go away. So I've done a lot of work on it, and there are a lot of tactics that I use when I'm speaking to people now, when I'm presenting, to try and slow myself down. But once that voice starts, it's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I want to say that it's very brave of you to actually come out and say that you suffer from imposter syndrome, because I think actually when you were talking there, I suffer from a little bit of it. I think all of us a little bit have that little voice in our head that says, is this right? Am I a fraud? Does someone look differently upon me? I think we all have a little bit of that. I think, like you said, there's probably some tactics, and I don't know if you want to share some of those tactics or not, but it's really funny when I doubt myself sometimes. On my LinkedIn profile, I've got people who have given me testimonials. And when I doubt myself, I go to that page and I read all the testimonials. I think to myself, oh, no, actually, I'm good at what I do. A lot of people have actually taken the time out. Yeah, a lot of people have taken the time out and actually gone and written about me. So actually, that gives me the confidence that I need to help overcome a little bit of the imposter syndrome. I don't think I've got it, but maybe I have a little bit. But yeah, I mean, is there any other tactics that you use particularly to help you overcome that?
There's a few. So I do look at my achievements, and I've started to make a habit this year in particular of I keep a list of achievements in the back of my notebooks. I think it's easy to look back and go, what have I done this year? It doesn't feel like I've done much. And you look back and you go, oh, January was a good month. And it's like, oh, February, okay. I'm actually doing all right. But I think it's important to surround yourself by really supportive people that understand you. And again, I lean to my network and we have really honest conversations about this. But one of the things that surprised me is that by opening up about it, as much as it feels quite vulnerable for me to open up about it, I'm surprised by the amount of people that it resonates with. Even down to, I was talking to my personal trainer about it, and he said, it's refreshing. He was like, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but it's refreshing to know that I'm not the only one, and I don't think it's spoken about enough. So that's why I do champion it now, because I think that it's something that people don't really talk about, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually quite natural. I think
Yeah.
if there ever comes a point where I'm not wondering if I'm good enough, that's probably when there's actually a problem.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you, and I hope that, for example, in some of the communities you're in, whether it's the Read one or the one you're setting up with women of ITSM, that people can come out and be open about the imposter syndrome, because I think it is really important. It's not spoke about enough, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that you suffer from
No,
imposter syndrome, because, like I've just said, I think I do a little bit, and I think generally everyone does. So, hats off to you for talking about it freely. Um,
thank you.
I want to go back a little bit, because you mentioned that you're a STEM ambassador and you go and talk in schools, or is it in college or university?
I
Where do you go,
do.
and what's involved with that exactly?
So I wanted to go and speak in schools. Particularly, I wanted to go back to my own secondary school, and this kind of stems back to thinking around a time of when I was preparing to go to college and university, and thinking, what am I going to do if I'm not going to do law? What am I going to do? Um, and I just remember my careers advisor gave me a book that had a list of companies that you can get work experience in, and that was the extent of it. And I was like, that's crazy.
Hmm.
And I hope things have changed a bit by now, but it's certainly not changed enough. So I really wanted to go back to my secondary school, and thankfully the youth worker that was there to support me is still there. So I reached out to her on Facebook and said, I'm really interested in doing this. Um, and I'd spent some time looking at the STEM Ambassadors website, because I want to be able to go into other schools and stuff. So I registered as a STEM Ambassador, which means that you go through your DBS check and all the rest of it, so that you're cleared to go and speak to young people. And so my interest is initially started, I want to go into secondary schools and talk about further education, career options. Um, we have some really honest conversations just around what school life is like.
Hmm.
And I admitted I hated school. Um, and it got the whole class engaged. It was like, people were saying, I don't like school. I was like, I hated that. I went to an all girls school. I hated maths, but it was a prerequisite for me to get a C graded at GCSE to get into the college course that I wanted to. And that was my motivation to work hard. And that resonated with a lot of people. Um, and the STEM Ambassador Program, they require 1 hour commitment per year. I can definitely
Okay.
give you that. Um, but as time's gone on, I think having a little girl who's she's 4, I've started to be more interested in going to primary schools as well. Not necessarily to talk about careers, but to talk about problem solving tactics, and engineering activities and stuff that you can really engage the younger generation in. Because I read an interesting statistic really that said by year 8 it's too late to go in
Hmm.
and try and talk about careers. Like people have a predisposition of what industry they're going to go into, so you need to start getting them younger. So if we can push STEM topics more and make it interesting and make it fun, and do that at the primary school age, then maybe we've got a chance of getting a better level of talent coming through into secondary schools and out the other side of education into the workforce.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I mean, I've got a flip side to it, because I also think, I mean, you're right in regards to what you say. Maybe year eight's too late, but I also think I'm thinking about my two teenagers, and one's going to be going to university next year. He still has no idea what he wants to do. Literally has no idea. And I think back to some of my friends when we was all at college, and some of them were going on to uni, some of them weren't, and they chopped and changed various different jobs and careers until they really found what they wanted. And I think to
Mm.
myself, and some of them were getting to 30 and they were still
Yeah.
chopping and changing. And I think to myself, but surely we can rectify this early on in our kind of
Oh,
careers.
we have to.
We,
Yeah.
we shouldn't have to wait until we're in our 30s to realize what we want to do. So somewhere along the line, principally, I think there needs to be a different structure to allow people to go into work, maybe working with a variety of different careers at an early
Yeah.
age, before then kind of going down the path which they then think
Yeah.
is right for them based on what they think is best suited to them and their characteristics at the end of the day. Because all well saying, as a 5, 6 year old, I want someone that probably has got a dog at home and loves pets, wants to be a veterinary nurse.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to 18, 19, and you look at the salary of that career, and maybe you've changed as an individual, maybe that's not what you want to do anymore. So
Yeah, absolutely.
have you got any ideas on how maybe we can change that, going forward, in
Yeah.
our education system?
I think ultimately we need to raise awareness. And one of the things that we talked about on the panel that I led is meeting people where they are. And we're seeing so many young people turn to social media for guidance on these kinds of things that we're going to have to, the only option we really have is to make use of social media to give an honest depiction of what these careers are like.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I think we need to really offer out more work experience. I mean,
Yeah.
the only work experience I had formerly was 2 weeks when I was, I think, about 15. But outside of that, as a quite a driven person, I went and got myself a Saturday job at the age of 13. I was washing old people's hair on a Saturday and taking home 15 quid a day and feeling super chuffed about it.
Yeah.
But I had that work ethic. And to be honest, I'm not actually sure what the Saturday law working laws are these days. But I think encouraging people to think from an earlier age, about types of work that they might want to do, customer services, whether customer services is even something that fits their personality, because some
Mm-hmm.
people do just prefer to work in kind of back end roles, isolated roles, away from the general public. But it's a really tricky one. But I would hate to see anyone stuck in a career that they don't like. So in terms of those people that do jump around until they're in their 30s, I actually have to take my hat off to them, because at
Yeah.
least they're going, I'm not happy. I'm going to try something else and find the right thing. And whether that means career pivot or completely change industries, good for them, really.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I just think that it's a shame we have to get to that kind of age to realise. I think we could be done a lot earlier. I think
Oh, definitely.
the work experience element that you mentioned is probably the right element.
Yeah.
If I go back to thinking about what I went through, I think when I was at school, I did a week working in like a sports shop, because at the time I liked PE. And
Yeah.
then in college, I remember doing a leisure and tourism course, and I spent a week in a gym. And yeah, neither of them have ended up being my career path. Obviously, I've been in recruitment for over 25 years, but essentially, it probably showed me what I didn't want to do. I remember the gym thinking, "God,
Yeah.
this is actually quite boring." Like,
Yeah.
yes, they are, like, if you're a personal trainer, you are, in that particular gym, they were doing their training, but then they had to go away cleaning all the equipment and stuff. And I was thinking, oh,
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. Um,
No.
it's not to say all personal trainers have to clean up after themselves, but it's just an example. It did
There's a
actually,
flip side, isn't
yeah,
there?
100%. I think, and you touched on social media. I think as let's say, a teenager that's on social media, being influenced by a lot of individuals, the best parts of anything is shown the majority of the
Yeah.
time, right? So, being a personal trainer, for example, is being shown, as doing the training and the benefits of that, but the behind the scenes of what's involved, and like I said earlier, on the cleaning element, etc., they're not
Yeah.
shown. So, they're the bits where I think maybe we need to highlight more is the pros, not the pros, the good and the bad of working in
Yeah.
each individual role. But I think,
Yeah, just a true depiction, really, of
yeah,
what a day in the life looks like,
hundred
and
percent,
that's a topic we've been talking about in the ISO community, because we've discussed that service management isn't very appealing to the younger generation. So what are we going to do about that? And we can write articles, which we do, but we're still not reaching the younger generation. So we are probably going to have to look at things like, God forbid, I've got to go on TikTok, but I might have to do it, because we need to raise awareness, and
yeah,
we want to show how rewarding it is, to do what we do, and encourage people to consider it as a viable option.
100%. I think it's a really hard one, though, service management. How do you get that, let's say, for example, a video story across that demonstrates what service management is really about? I think it's a tough one because it's not boring. It can be a really exciting career, right? But it's not like a product where you're going to highlight a product on a video.
Exactly.
I think service management is quite a tough one. And I think when you're a teenager, that might not be, you might not understand that at that stage.
Yeah.
So I think it needs a lot of careful consideration on how that kind of approach happens. But I think you're right. I think targeting where people are, which is social media. Let's be honest, the majority of teenagers are on Instagram or TikTok. My two are, so
Yeah.
I know what it's like. Or they're on Discord. So yes, you need to target those sites and hopefully then attract them in.
Yeah.
So I take my hat off to you. Keep doing what you're doing really well. I want to talk a little bit more about your working experience so far. You touched on, obviously, you know, being frustrated early on in your career and then kind of finding your feet. So let's forget about the frustrating part. Let's talk about since you found your feet. Talk me through like that kind of like transition you've been on and what it's meant for someone like you, because you've probably gone from being frustrated, maybe working for other individuals now, um, and you still work for other individuals, but you've now
Yeah.
managed people yourself. But what's that transition been like? How large are some of the teams you've been involved with? Maybe tell us about some of the projects and like what the impact means of those projects. That'd be really interesting to
Yeah,
hear
of
for the
course.
listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I would say leadership has been challenging, and the progress definitely hasn't been linear. And there was a lot to learn. So my first team leadership role, it's I'm almost embarrassed when I look back and think about some of the mistakes that I made in my behaviour as a leader, and the way that I handled certain situations. And although I'm very empathetic, I haven't always led with empathy. So sometimes I've been kind of very hard and fast. Um, and so it's been a real journey, but one that I'm really proud of. I fully accept that I never stop learning,
Hmm.
um, and wanting to continually improve. I hope feeds into me being a good leader. And one of the things that I did very recently is I asked my team for some really honest feedback. I was like, look, I'm not fishing for compliments. I genuinely want to know how you think I'm doing. I'm 6 months into a role. How do you think the changes that I've affected? Is there something I can do differently in terms of how I communicate with you? Is it enough? Is it not enough? Because people have different ways of wanting and needing to be managed. So I manage service delivery teams and infrastructure engineers. So some of them require very different approaches. So it's kind of that continual growth as a leader. Um, and in terms of some of the projects that I've worked on, honestly, I can say no 2 days are the same. I've worked on projects involving huge building refurbs, like moving media companies across London from the West End to kind of the Shoreditch area. Um, one of the companies that I worked for took over an old nightclub called Turn Mills
I remember
over in the
terminals.
East End. Yeah, and I was in there when it was a complete building site and there was no partition walls up in the building. And I was kind of going in, walking around with builders, scoping out what I want for my comms room, scoping out user areas and stuff and build rooms. And it's so exciting.
Mm.
But there are days where it's hard work and I've got my head buried in reports and, talking about how am I going to explain performance for the last month or where we are in terms of project updates. So there's two really strong flip sides. Ultimately, I love what I do, and my career's put me in situations where I've been very fortunate to travel. So I've been to some really interesting places, and I've met some really interesting people. Um, but ultimately, I love what I do in terms of delivering value and building and shaping teams. And the people aspect of it is something that I'm so passionate about. I love being able to take a team that's not necessarily performing at their best, and play to people's skill sets, help them develop their weaker areas, uh, and really build a nice community in a team.
Hmm.
I think that probably the most evident situation I've been where I've done that. I worked for a media company, and I looked after a few different teams. I think it was probably about 18 people in total across various different sites in London. But we had, and I hate to key the cheesy phrase of "we're a family,"
Yeah.
but we became a family. Like, we were such a close knit team. There was some really nice friendships in there, but we all had each other's back. And if one site was struggling, the other site would, naturally help them out and bring everyone back onto the right level, without me having to say, "Right, guys, I need you here, I need you there." It was really organic, and I think that's because of the culture that we built as a team.
Hmm.
So yeah,
No,
the people aspect of it is paramount for me, because that ultimately is what's going to drive value in any business, is your people that's delivering it.
100%. I agree with everything you said there. Music to me is it. I completely agree with you. I think what'd be interesting to know a bit more about is like how do you build that culture and that community? Because I've worked in organisations before where I've uh, I've had a good culture and I've also been involved in a bad culture. Um, and I've gone into both organisations as an employee from the outside, join an organisation that's already, had those cultures in place. But it sounds like maybe have you shaped the culture of where you've worked,
Yeah.
or yeah? So how do you shape that?
It takes time, and it
Hmm.
takes trust. And it's always tricky going into a new company as an outsider. That first 6 months always feels really rocky, because and I have to sympathise with the people that I've been brought in to lead and to manage, because to them, they're probably experiencing feelings of anxiousness of, what am
Mm,
I going to come in, what am I going to be like as a leader, am I going to be a micromanager, and I really try to emulate the kind of practices of good people that I've worked with, and people within my network who have set examples to me, and I try to emulate that in my practice. But it doesn't come overnight. People are skeptical. It takes time to build that relationship. Um, and I think also it's the trust that you're going to do what's right for the team. So I've been in situations where I've had to look at, do I have the right people? Do I need to maybe move some people on, bring some new people in, and start to rebuild in certain areas? And it's not easy, and it's something that, when the working day is done, sometimes it weighs heavy on your head. You think, I've got to make some really difficult decisions, and I'm ultimately responsible for the happiness of people's day-to-day job. It's not comfortable, but
yeah.
it's rewarding once you get over those hurdles.
Yeah, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think as a junior IT individual who's just starting their career, I think it's really easy for them to say, "Oh, I want to get into a manager position," but
Mm,
ultimately, management isn't for everyone, right?
no.
Because you've got, yeah, like you said, you might need to shape that culture if it's not already in place. You need to build a community. You need to know whether you're going to micromanage people or not. You need to move people on. There are some really, really tough decision making skills that you need to be a good manager. I mean, you don't need to name names, but over your career, is there one or two particular managers where you've really enjoyed working for, and you thought, oh, I'm going to take those skill sets from that manager and use them in my management skills that I'm going to
Yeah.
use on that? Yeah, yeah. And what are
Yeah,
some of
there
those skills? Tell
definitely
me about
is.
them.
So, and he won't mind me calling him out. I worked with someone who is now family, Paul Greenstead from Zenith Bank,
Okay.
and he was probably the most supportive person that I've ever worked with in my career. He allowed me space to try new things, to grow as a leader, and we had some really honest conversations about what works and what doesn't. And he gave me the flexibility to build the team how I wanted to do it. But we kept each other really honest, and it's almost, we had our own little team outside of the delivery team that we were shaping, where we keep each other on track with what we were doing. We'd work through audits together, because outside of being a leader, you've also got a day job. So I'm still a service delivery manager. I still have to do all the things like audits, writing processes and procedures, as well as then leading a team. So when the team need me, it's almost like everything has to stop so that they get the full attention. And that might be down to having a conversation about how someone's weekend was, or
Mm.
just being a supportive ear because someone's going through something in their personal life. But that's something that Paul was really good at doing with me. I mean, we went through, I think in our time working together, we'd seen each other through births, deaths, and marriages. And that's completely outside of the working world. But he's a complete rock to me.
Yeah.
And then I've worked with some amazing people. I worked with a lady called Kate Eldridge in my career at IQEQ, and very much the same kind of thing as she let me look after my region. I looked after the UK, Ireland, and Crown dependencies, and she trusted that I was going to get the job done. I remember we moved to remote working at that point, and I sent her a message one morning and said, "Kate, I really need to pop out and get some paracetamol. I've got a banging headache." She was like, "Why are you telling me?" She was like, "I trust that you're going to do your job. Just go do whatever you want." And having that trust and flexibility from her set us off on a great relationship. And yes, I'm really fortunate. I mean, there are some of the people that I've worked for and with over the years that I'm still in touch with now, and probably will be for the rest of my life.
Yeah, no,
There are some awful ones as well, but they don't deserve the credit to be named.
We won't talk about them, but it's lovely hearing about Paul and Katie and the impact they've had on you and your management style. I mean, I know you said we're not going to name names of bad ones, but are there any particular traits of some of those bad managers, or that you think actually that I definitely don't want to implement those in my kind of management style? Yeah. Give me some examples.
I mean, it could be a long conversation. I will try and summarise.
Okay.
I had a chat once that I worked with who would say to me, to be successful, you should probably consider coming to work wearing a dress.
Oh,
and
really?
the day that I did wear a dress, he was like, "Oh, that's much better." I'm like, you don't get the right to tell someone how to dress, but there's some gaslighting behaviours and some really misogynistic comments of, "All right, sweetheart, make us a tea," and, "Oh, you'll take the minutes, won't you, Georgie? Because you're a token female of the team," kind of thing. And some of those behaviours, like, honestly, when I say that's happened within the last 5 years, it's embarrassing to me that still happens.
Yeah.
Or seeing comments for people that I've worked directly for, of women walking through the office and they go, "Oh, she's fit," or, "Oh, I don't like that." And you just think that, you're not leadership material, or micromanaging, kind of setting up calls first thing on a Monday morning and last thing on a Friday to talk about how your week, what you're going to do that week, and on the Friday, have you done it? I'm like, that things like that don't add value. Like, sure, have those conversations around that time for setting a direction for the team and, ramping up the energy for the week, but not making a tick list of saying, right, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and on Friday, have you done X, Y, and Z? It's people, you lose buy-in really quickly.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good. You, like you say, you learn from those, don't you? At the end of the day, I remember, as a 19-year-old, I got into recruitment. I very quickly had 2, 3, 4 different managers, and the ones that stood out are the ones that I think they let you be who you were. They knew when to come to me. They weren't full on micromanagers. Yes, I probably needed a little bit of hand holding at times, but they just knew when to come in at that. Whereas some of the others were just a bit too micromanaging. They had no other scope to go beyond micromanaging. And not the way I work. I mean, I mentioned the word micromanagement, and we recently had a gentleman on the podcast called Indy Bamber, who talked quite a lot about micromanagement and whether there's a place for it in the workplace, and particularly in the tech workplace. What are your thoughts on micromanagement?
I hate it, and I would hate to ever be on the receiving end of an accusation of being a micromanager. It's just the worst. I mean, if you're in a situation where you're going to your one-to-one to talk about your own professional development, and basically you're just helping to tick things off your manager's work list, to-do list, you're in the wrong environment. It's I think it's really toxic, and just no good can come of it. And it's when you've got people that are kind of too much in the weeds and they can't let go. I just think, you're never going to succeed by having your foot on someone's neck. And in the teams that I've worked in, that I've led, that have performed the best, it's because I've given them the space to learn and to grow. and we reflect on things that have gone well and things that have not necessarily gone well, rather than me breathing down their neck every 5 seconds or saying, "Why have you done it like this? You should do that."
Yeah.
Because people have got to find their own style and find what works for them.
Hmm.
Obviously, we have to operate within certain guidelines and frameworks, but there's a way to do it. I'm totally against micromanaging.
So, just out of interest, in that kind of place where you talk about there about micromanagement, if, for example, because you're in a service management world where I'm sure you have SLAs or KPIs that you need to adhere to, right? So there must be sometimes individuals that are falling behind some of those KPIs, or
Yeah.
so obviously maybe not micromanagement, but how do you then manage those individuals?
So I try to catch those issues as early as we can, and I do a lot of that through one-to-ones, and just keeping the channels of communication open. So sometimes I'll just give people, I'll send them a message saying, "Are you free for a quick chat about X?" and set the expectation of what we need to discuss. To try and understand early on of, is there going to be an issue here? Do we need to bring in more resource? Do we need to look at upskilling you? Are you dealing with a particularly difficult customer? Because in service management, we do face some people that are tricky, to put it nicely. And sometimes they need that extra support in terms of dealing with the business and stuff, which is what I'm there for. And I've always said to my teams, if someone's going to shout at you, politely end the call. I'll help you. I will step in and help them, because I don't think anyone needs to be shouted at in their day-to-day job, particularly not over resolving a tech
Yeah.
issue. So it's all about bringing the tone down, and de-escalating the situation, and understanding what's behind it, and working through it together whilst managing expectations. So if I see my team are struggling with that, I call it out as quickly as we can and give them the confidence that they've got the support of not just me, but for the remainder of the team, that we will face it as a team. No one person needs to struggle on their own.
It's good. It's good. I wish I had you as a manager, Georgie. It's the type of manager that I would
Too
have
kind.
wanted. I mean, look, we're coming to the end of the podcast. I always like to kind of get your thoughts on, like, where do you see kind of the future of not tech, but let's say service management? Is it much different to where we are today, the next 5-10 years, and the kind of challenges that we might need to overcome, as part of that change, or as part of that future potentially?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's becoming more evident, as we go through time, and certainly over the next 5 years, is that you don't need to be technical to work in IT service management, because at the end of the day, it's about delivering value and delivering objectives.
Hmm.
And I hope it really brings to light something that I've said throughout my career, is that I've always been that intermediary between the business and IT. And I think that will come out more as the soft skill side will be played on a lot more now. Um, and obviously, I hope to see more women in service management and in technology based roles altogether. And I think hopefully some of the good work that we're doing within the community and within the women of ITSM is going to contribute to that.
Yeah, good, good. I think it's really important what you said there, because I think the problem with particularly young adults, at school at the moment, is maybe the world of technology is geared towards coding. So
Yeah,
I think it then puts people off kind of looking at that as a career. Whereas, like you say, if you've got good communications, because you don't need to be massively, have a massive technical
yeah,
background to work in technology. So I think that's a great selling point. And I think maybe they're the type of videos that need to be put out on TikTok or
yeah,
Instagram to attract young adults to come into the world of service management and technology.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
okay. Any final thoughts from you before we finish off on this session?
Um, I would say to your listeners, that if you're considering getting into IT, or as a woman in service management, and you're not sure where to turn, seek allyship from your organisations, from your peers, from our networks. Don't continue to try and push on alone, because it makes the journey so much harder. And there's a huge community of people out there that are willing to help. Um, so seek out the support and guidance, because it's game changing. I mean, it's something that I didn't do early in my career, and I've probably lent on my community a lot more in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's completely changed my outlook, my career trajectory.
Mhm.
But also, it's given me the drive that I want to help people even more. So, if you're considering it, don't sit on the fence. Come and join us.
Good, good. Like you say, it's all about community. Be part of a community. You're not alone. So thank you for that. Well, listen, it's been fantastic having you on Tech Life Stories. Thank you again. Take two. Hopefully, this time has worked out successfully for both of us.
Let's hope so. Thank you for having me.
No, not problem at all. All right, I'll speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.